Elias Thorne lived in a world of glass and steel, a penthouse suite that sat atop the city like a crown of cold, hard light. He was a man for whom the word enough had no meaning. His wealth was a silent, unblinking sentinel, guarding him from the common anxieties of the world. He was the CEO of Thorne Global, a company that bought and sold entire industries, and his days were a blur of board meetings, stock tickers, and the low hum of ambition. His life was a meticulously curated affair. His apartment, a minimalist masterpiece, was kept in a state of pristine, sterile perfection by a team of unseen professionals. Among them was Maria, his maid. Elias knew her by name, but little else. She was a quiet, almost spectral presence who arrived at dawn, worked with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural, and vanished before he even had his second cup of bespoke coffee. He saw her as an extension of his opulent life, a necessary function to maintain the cleanliness of his golden cage. One crisp Tuesday morning, a small, insignificant detail shattered the illusion of his perfect world. He was searching for his vintage Cartier watch, a gift from a Saudi prince. A trinket worth more than Maria's annual salary. It wasn't in its usual spot. He tore through his bedroom, his walk-in closet, his humidoral, to no avail. A cold knot of anger and suspicion formed in his stomach. He remembered seeing it on his bedside table the day before, just before Maria had come to clean. He knew it was a trivial sum to him, a rounding error in his ledger, but the principle of the thing gnawed at him. He was a man who lived by principles, even if they were serving. He called his head of security, a man named Henderson, a former Marine whose face was a study in grim stoicism. "Henderson, I need you to find Maria's address and her personal file. Everything, sir." "Is there a problem?" Henderson's voice was a low rumble. "No, there's no problem. Just find it. I want to pay her a visit. I have a feeling she might have accidentally misplaced something." The unspoken accusation hung in the air, a venomous thought that Elias didn't dare voice aloud. He spent the rest of the day in a state of controlled fury. He closed a multi-million-dollar deal on his lunch break, but the satisfaction was hollow. All he could think about was the missing watch, the invisible maid, and the sense of betrayal that pricked at his carefully constructed sense of invincibility. He was going to confront her, not with police, but with his own cold, hard authority. He was going to look her in the eye and watch her lie. Henderson's report arrived that evening. It was a file full of dry, bureaucratic data. An address in a part of the city Elias didn't know existed, a neighborhood a world away from his glass tower. It was a place where the streets were narrow and cracked, where the buildings were a jumble of faded brick and peeling paint, and where the air hummed with the sounds of a life he had never experienced. He got into his armored town car, a silent beast of German engineering, and gave the driver the address. The drive was a journey into another dimension. The gleaming skyscrapers of downtown gave way to the sprawling, monotonous suburbs, which in turn gave way to a dense, chaotic urban landscape of small businesses and crowded apartments. The town car, a symbol of his privilege, felt like a vulgar intrusion. The driver, a stoic man named Frank, pulled up to a small two-story house, its front porch a jumble of potted plants and children's toys. Elias stared at the address on his phone, then at the house. This was it. It looked impossibly small, a humble fortress against the storm of the city. He got out of the car, his silk suit feeling like a costume, his expensive shoes crunching on the cracked pavement. He walked up the short path, his heart a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. He was not a confrontational man. He was a man of power, of abstract concepts and distant commands. This was a physical confrontation, a real-world problem, and it felt messy and wrong. He knocked on the door. He expected to hear a man's voice, maybe a television, the sounds of a normal, simple life. But the only sound was a soft, melodic tune, a haunting melody played on a piano. The music was beautiful, a slow, gentle, and intricate piece that seemed to speak of a deep sadness and a profound hope. The door opened, and Maria was there. She was not in her maid's uniform, but in a simple dress, her hair down, her face free of makeup. She looked different, younger, more vibrant. But her eyes, her large, dark eyes, were filled with a raw, profound fear. "Mr. Thorne," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. What are you doing here?" Elias stood there, his carefully constructed accusations dying on his lips. The music, the fear in her eyes, the sheer unexpectedness of the scene, all of it conspired to silence him. "The watch," he said, the words feeling foreign and small. "My watch, it's missing. I thought I'd come and ask you about it." Maria's face went white. She looked from Elias to his town car, then back to him, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and shame. She didn't speak. She just gestured for him to come inside, her hand trembling. He stepped inside, and his world, his carefully constructed reality, shattered into a million pieces. The house was not what he expected. It was not a place of poverty or squalor. It was a place of love and life, of art and beauty. The small living room was dominated by an old, well-worn piano. It was the source of the music. Seated at the piano was a young man, maybe a few years younger than Maria, his face a canvas of concentration. His hands, long and elegant, moved with a fluid grace over the keys. But his legs were in braces, and a wheelchair sat nearby. The room was filled with books, paintings, and drawings. The walls were covered with canvases, some half-finished, some complete. They were beautiful, vibrant, and full of a raw, untamed talent. They were paintings of the city, not his city of glass and steel, but Maria's city, a world of sun-drenched alleys and vibrant street markets. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, was sitting on a plush rug, her face buried in a book. She looked up, her eyes filled with a curious wonder, and then she saw Elias. She smiled, a small, shy smile that melted the cold armor around his heart. Elias's gaze went back to the young man at the piano. The music stopped, and the young man looked up, his eyes a mirror of Maria's. He spoke in a soft, halting voice. You're Mr. Thorne. Maria has told me so much about you." Maria, now standing beside Elias, put a protective hand on the young man's shoulder. "This is my brother Matteo," she said, her voice full of a gentle, profound love. "And this is my sister, Lena." Elias stood there, a stone statue in a world of living, breathing art. The watch, the suspicion, the entire reason for his visit, all of it felt like a distant, nonsensical dream. He was looking at something he had never seen before, a life. A life of struggle, yes, but a life of incredible beauty, of raw, untamed talent, and of a love that was stronger than any hardship. Maria, seeing the stunned look on Elias's face, began to speak, her voice a low, hurried whisper. Mateo, he was in an accident, a car accident. He was a prodigy, a pianist. He had a scholarship to a prestigious music school, but the accident, it took away his legs. The doctors said he would never play again, but he is a fighter. He taught himself. Now, he plays with his hands, with his heart. He is a composer, and my sister Lena, she is a painter. She sees the world in colors no one else can. Elias looked at the walls, at the paintings. They were Lena's. They were masterpieces of color and light, of a vibrant life he had never known. He looked at Mateo, at the young man's hands, at the love in his eyes. He looked at Maria, at the quiet, almost invisible woman who cleaned his house, and he saw a different person entirely. He saw a guardian, a protector, a woman who held her world together with a profound, unshakable strength. The watch, he said, the words a hollow echo. What about the watch? Maria's eyes filled with tears. She went to a small table in the corner, and from a small, velvet bag, she pulled out the Cartier watch. It was there, shining, perfect. I'm so sorry, Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice shaking. I found it on the floor, near the bed. I didn't want to leave it. I was so afraid someone else might take it. I was going to bring it to you first thing tomorrow, I swear. Elias took the watch, its cold weight feeling like a condemnation. He had come here, in his arrogance, his privileged fury, to accuse her of theft. And what he had found was a world of beauty and grace, a world of struggle and love. He had been so blind, so self-absorbed, so convinced of his own rightness. He looked at Maria, at the tears in her eyes, at the fear on her face. He had come to confront a thief, and instead, he had confronted himself. He was a man who lived in a golden cage, and he had just realized that the cage was not protecting him from the world, but from life itself. Elias left the house a changed man. The silence in his town car was no longer a comfort, but a profound, suffocating emptiness. The skyscrapers, his golden kingdom, now looked like tombstones, monuments to his own spiritual death. He spent the rest of the night in a haze of contemplation. He looked at his life, at the cold, sterile perfection of his penthouse, and he saw it for what it was, a beautiful, empty tomb. He had been living a lie, a life of isolated privilege, convinced that his wealth was a measure of his worth. The next morning, he went to work, not to close a deal, but to open a door. He called his head of human resources, a woman named Sharon, a no-nonsense professional who ran the department with ruthless efficiency. Sharon, he said, his voice a low, commanding rumble, I need you to open a new fund. A scholarship fund. A full scholarship for a music student, a composer, and another one for an artist, a painter. Full ride. Tuition, housing, everything. Sharon, a woman who was used to his abrupt, often bizarre demands, didn't bat an eye. Yes, Mr. Thorne, what's the name of the fund? He thought for a moment. The Vance Fund, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He remembered Maria's last name from her file. He wanted to give her family a future, a chance, a life. He wanted to give them the freedom to create, to live, to be. He wanted to give them the one thing he had been so blind to, a world without limits. He then called his head of security, Henderson. Henderson, he said, I need you to find an artist's gallery, a small one, a local one. I need to buy some art. I want to buy everything, and I need a new piano, a very good one, a concert grand. He hung up the phone and looked out at the city. The sun was rising, painting the world in a wash of gold and orange. The city no longer looked like a collection of cold, hard tombs. It looked like a living, breathing canvas. Elias never spoke to Maria about what he had done. He simply gave her a letter, a simple, heartfelt letter that thanked her for her service, for her kindness, for her life. He gave her a new job, a new role. She was no longer his maid. She was his personal assistant. Her salary was more than doubled. Her hours were flexible, and her job was to help him run the new foundation he had created. Maria, overwhelmed and speechless, took the letter. She read it, her eyes filled with tears, and she looked at the man who had once been a myth, a god, a stranger. She looked at the man who had, in one night, changed her life forever. Elias began to change his own life as well. He sold his penthouse, that sterile monument to his own ambition, and bought a house in a quiet, leafy suburb. He filled the house not with cold, minimalist art, but with the vibrant, chaotic paintings of Lena. He learned to play the piano, not with the intention of becoming a concert pianist, but with the intention of understanding Mateo's art, of understanding his soul. He began to see the world differently. He no longer saw people as cogs in a machine, as functions in his life. He saw them as people, as individuals with stories, with struggles, with dreams. He began to see the world not through the lens of profit and loss, but through the lens of kindness and compassion. The watch, the Cartier, was never worn again. It sat on a shelf in his office, a silent, glittering reminder of the day he had gone searching for a thief and had found a part of himself he never knew existed. The day he had gone to a maid's house, and what he saw there had changed his life forever.